500,000 people poured out of Beirut in the middle of the night, some with no shoes on, as evacuation warnings spread across entire districts, and the war suddenly moved beyond the edges of the battlefield. And after U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned the world, just wait, many analysts now believe the next 48 hours of the Iran-Israel war could become the most dangerous stretch yet. It was late Thursday night in Beirut. The Israeli military had issued evacuation warnings covering entire sections of the southern suburbs. Not a single building, not a single street, entire neighborhoods. Areas where more than 500,000 people live were told to get out immediately. And they did. They ran. A shopkeeper named Hussein told reporters he watched families rush out of apartment buildings barefoot. Group chats exploded with frantic messages telling loved ones to leave right away. Cars packed the roads heading north. People who had already been driven from their homes once during the 2024 war with Israel found themselves running again. They had returned. They had rebuilt. They were trying to live normally again. And now, in the darkness, before the bombs had even landed, they were fleeing once more. That same night, on the other side of the world, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stood before cameras and delivered a line that should alarm everyone watching this war. He said, "If you think you've seen something, just wait." Think about that for a moment. By then, this conflict had already seen nearly a week of massive bombardment, thousands of strikes, Iran's supreme leader reportedly dead, Iran's navy shattered, its air force effectively neutralized, its senior command structure decapitated, and yet the man overseeing America's military posture was telling the world that what had happened so far was not the full picture. This is day 7 of the war, and I want to walk you through what changed, what appears to be coming next, and why the coming 2 days may end up being the most important window of the entire conflict. Start with Beirut, because what happened there reveals the strategic shift Israel is making. During the first 6 days, Israel's military activity in Lebanon was focused mainly on the south. The targets were Hezbollah launch positions, storage sites, command nodes, financial networks, and senior operatives. It was a grinding campaign meant to weaken Hezbollah's ability to keep firing rockets into Israeli territory. Step by step, Israel was degrading the group's capacity to operate. But on Thursday, the pattern changed. Israel issued sweeping evacuation orders for nearly all of Dahiya, the southern suburbs of Beirut. This is not just another neighborhood. This is Hezbollah's political center of gravity, its organizational stronghold, the place where key leaders are believed to live, work, coordinate, and hide. It is also densely populated civilian territory, and Israel effectively told the entire area, "Leave now." By Thursday night, strikes were already hitting Beirut itself, not just southern Lebanon. Israeli officials said the military was entering what they called the next phase of operations. The IDF reported thousands of strikes and thousands of weapons used in Lebanon since the conflict began. Troops were also reportedly ordered deeper into Lebanese territory, moving beyond the immediate border zone and taking additional positions. That matters because evacuation warnings on this scale are not just humanitarian notices. They are also military signals. The message is simple: clear the civilians, because the infrastructure underneath is next. In other words, Israel is signaling that the campaign is no longer only about suppressing Hezbollah fire from border areas. It is now pressing toward Hezbollah's core. And the 500,000 civilians who fled Beirut that night were not just witnesses to that shift. They were the human cost of the announcement. Lebanon's government, already overwhelmed and with little power to control events on the ground, tried to send its own message. It moved to end visa-free travel for Iranians. That was Beirut's attempt to say to Tehran, "Do not drag this country deeper into your war." But that gesture changes almost nothing. The Lebanese state cannot stop Israeli airstrikes. It cannot disarm Hezbollah. It cannot control the tempo of escalation. It can issue statements. It can make symbolic policy moves. But while those statements are being made, the country is still burning. Now let's turn to Pete Hegseth's warning, because that is the other major signal from day 7. The United States has already been using some of the most powerful conventional military tools in its arsenal: cruise missiles, stealth bombers, bunker-busting bombs, drones, and advanced fighter aircraft. None of that is minor. None of that is symbolic. These are the weapons of a full-scale, high-intensity air campaign. But U.S. Central Command has now said that new capabilities are being introduced. Notice what that means. They did not specify exactly what those capabilities are. That is not accidental. In war, ambiguity can be a weapon in itself. If your enemy does not know what is about to be used against him, he cannot prepare for it, cannot disperse against it properly, and cannot reassure his own people that he has a response. Military observers have already floated several possibilities: more advanced electronic warfare systems, new generations of bunker-penetrating munitions designed for deeply buried facilities, systems meant to blind communications or disable radar networks, potentially other platforms or weapons not yet publicly acknowledged. The important point is not which guess proves right. The important point is the message. Hegseth was telling Iran and telling the rest of the world that the first 6 days were not the ceiling, they were the opening phase. And if that is true, then day 7 is not the midpoint of a war winding down, it is the threshold of a war expanding. There is another development from days 6 and 7 that deserves much more attention than it has received, and that is Iran's apparent focus on THAAD radar systems. THAAD, or Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, is one of the most advanced missile defense systems the United States has in the region. It is designed to detect incoming ballistic threats at long range, track them, and guide interceptors to destroy them before they hit their targets. But the key to the system is not just the interceptor. It is the radar. The radar is what makes the entire architecture work. Without that radar, the system is effectively blind. What makes this so serious is that Iran appears to be shifting from brute force missile pressure towards selective strikes on the sensors that enable interception. That is a smarter, more efficient strategy. Instead of simply firing large numbers of projectiles and hoping some get through, Iran may be trying to dismantle the eyes of the defense network itself. If the radar goes down or is degraded, the entire defensive picture changes. U.S. installations in the Gulf become more exposed. Troops stationed in the region become more vulnerable. The impressive interception rate that has protected bases and cities over the past week depends on those sensors functioning properly. And that is before you factor in another problem. Interceptor stockpiles are not limitless. Analysts have already warned that if the initial pace of attacks were sustained, Gulf states could begin running dangerously low on interceptor missiles in as little as 1 to 2 weeks. Now imagine that same scenario with damaged or degraded radar coverage. Iran would not need to win by sheer volume, it would only need to make the defense system see less clearly. That is why this phase matters. Iran's missile reserves may be badly reduced, but that does not mean Iran is no longer dangerous. A depleted arsenal can still be deadly if it is used intelligently. And targeting the architecture of missile defense is exactly the kind of move a weaker but still capable military would make. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi underscored that posture in a Thursday interview from inside Tehran. Bombs were falling in the capital, yet he appeared on camera and was asked directly whether Iran had requested a ceasefire. His answer was no. He was asked whether Iran would negotiate with the United States. Again, the answer was effectively no. He said Washington could not be trusted. He argued that Iran had engaged before in good faith, had made concessions, and had still ended up under attack. He was also asked about the possibility of an American ground invasion. He did not sound frightened. He said Iran was prepared. He said the Revolutionary Guard and Iran's ground forces had spent years preparing for such a scenario. Those comments were meant for multiple audiences at once. For Iranians at home, the goal was morale. Show confidence, show resistance, tell the public the state is still standing. For the wider world, the message was that Iran sees itself as the wronged party, a country that negotiated and was hit anyway. And for Washington, the message was a warning. Air power is one thing, but if you put boots on the ground, this turns into something far bigger and far bloodier. That matters because while Trump has not openly announced a ground invasion, Hegseth also refused to remove that option from the table. And politically, the barriers to escalation inside Washington are weaker than many people expected. Congressional efforts to constrain Trump's war powers have failed in both chambers. That does not mean every future move is automatic, but it does mean there is currently no strong domestic brake visibly stopping further escalation. Still, there is a harsh reality sitting beside Araghchi's defiance. Iran is not the military power it was a week ago. Its air force has been devastated. Its navy has taken catastrophic losses. A large share of its missile capability has already been consumed or destroyed. Senior commanders are dead. Top leadership has been shattered. The chain of command has been hit repeatedly. So if ground combat ever came, U.S. forces would not face the Iran of day one. they would face what remains: fragmented units, Revolutionary Guard elements, regional militias, decentralized fighters operating under standing instructions, and defenders on home soil. And history gives that last point enormous weight. Superior conventional power does not guarantee easy victory when the opponent is fighting in familiar terrain, on its own ground, among its own people, with ideology, nationalism, and survival all fused together. Now let's talk about oil, because this war is no longer a regional story alone. It is beginning to move into the daily lives of people far beyond the battlefield. Energy markets have been climbing under the pressure of this conflict. Oil prices have risen sharply as traders factor in disruption, uncertainty, and risk. The longer this lasts, the more that risk premium builds into everything from shipping to fuel to insurance. And the biggest choke point remains the Strait of Hormuz. The White House has been asked repeatedly when the waterway will fully reopen to normal flow, and the answers so far have been vague. Officials say they are monitoring developments. They say the Navy can escort tankers if necessary. But phrases like "if necessary" hide a much larger truth. The situation is already far outside normal conditions. Tanker movement has slowed dramatically. Large numbers of ships remain waiting in open water. Regional energy infrastructure has already been hit. A strike on critical Saudi facilities showed that Iran still has the capacity to inject fear directly into the global energy system. Qatari LNG flows, essential to markets in Europe and Asia, remain under pressure. Insurance markets are reacting accordingly. When commercial insurers begin treating passage through the Gulf as prohibitively risky, governments have to step in or trade starts freezing. The extraordinary discussions now taking place around political risk coverage and state-backed guarantees show how abnormal the moment has become. Once governments start acting as backstops for maritime war risk, you are no longer in the realm of ordinary market disruption. You are in the realm of strategic emergency. In the United States, gasoline prices have already jumped sharply. Analysts say panic has not fully set in yet, but those same analysts are assuming no dramatic new escalation. That is a fragile assumption. And again, the man running America's defense posture just said, just wait. But with all of this military analysis, one thing cannot be allowed to disappear, and that is the human toll. The casualty figures coming out of Iran are staggering. Human rights groups and conflict monitors estimate that the dead number in the thousands after only the first several days of war. That includes major regime figures, military commanders, and high-level officials, but it also includes civilians, families, children, people buried under collapsed apartment blocks, people caught in neighborhoods hit because they lived near what someone else decided was a strategic target. The civilians fleeing Beirut are not background footage. They are not set decoration for geopolitical commentary. They are parents carrying children in the dark. Elderly people trying to move faster than their bodies allow. Families who already lost homes once and are now losing them again. Americans are also leaving the region in significant numbers under evacuation advisories. Flights have begun bringing stranded citizens home. Airports, once known as major global transit hubs, are partially shut or heavily disrupted. Travelers from Europe, Asia, and North America remain stranded across multiple countries. Thousands are waiting in hotels, near damaged airports, or under uncertain security conditions, hoping the next route out remains open long enough for them to take it. So what comes next? Here is what appears clear. Militarily, both Israel and the United States are signaling expansion, not restraint. Israel says it is entering a new phase and is moving deeper. The United States says new capabilities are on the way. That means more strikes, more risk, and likely attacks on targets farther inland and deeper in the strategic network of both Iran and its regional allies. Diplomatically, the picture is bleak. Iran says no ceasefire, no meaningful trust, no immediate negotiation. The United Nations can call for de-escalation. China and Russia can issue statements. European governments can plead for calm. None of that matters much if the actors dropping bombs and launching missiles have already decided the war still has farther to go. Politically, the biggest unanswered question may be public reaction inside the United States. Polling suggests many Americans are uneasy with the war and unconvinced the administration has clearly defined its goals. But discomfort is not the same as pressure, and pressure is not the same as policy change. Right now, the administration still has room to act. That is why Day 7 feels so important. Beirut's mass evacuation was not just another tragic episode in a long war. It looked like a signal flare announcing the start of something larger. Iran's posture has shifted from shock and retaliation toward adaptive defense and selective disruption. Israel is moving beyond containment into deeper confrontation. Washington is telling the world that even after a week of devastation, more force may still be coming. The people of Beirut are already on the roads. The people of Tehran are already in shelters. Gulf states are watching their defenses, their airports, and their energy systems strain under the pressure. Global markets are beginning to absorb the cost, and in the background, new fronts and new proxies may already be in motion. This war did not stabilize on day 7. It changed shape. And if that change is what it appears to be, then day 8 will not bring relief. It will bring a wider, harsher, and potentially far more dangerous phase of the conflict. Stay close to this story, because the next major development may not come in days, it could come in hours.